Hi, Kara. Welcome to the Debrief.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. It's going to be fun. All right. Before we jump into this awesome conversation about building teams, I'm going to run through a couple quick housekeeping notes for the folks at home. Welcome. So first, this is going to be recorded. So if you need to jump out for a sec, grab a water, go to the bathroom because you've been drinking a lot of water, you'll be able to replay the highlights. Two, I posted this in the chat, but if you have a question, you can throw it there or in the ask a question field at the bottom. We fielded a couple questions from folks who had signed up ahead of time, so I'll try to get to those, but we want to make this a conversation with everybody who's involved, so feel free to jump in. And then for the first timers out there, this is the Debrief presented by BrightHire. The Debrief is a series of conversations with founders, executives, and talent thought leaders. Kara, I think you're all of those things, on how they've built talented and diverse teams. I'm your host, Teddy Chestnut, co-faunder of BrightHire, and I'm truly thrilled to welcome founder and CEO of Hint, famous, of course, for the water, and author of Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, Kara Goldin. Kara, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right. We're here to learn about your experience building the most popular beverage in Silicon Valley and the Empire State Building. I can attest from LinkedIn, stocking all of their fridges with this. I drank 7 bottles of this a day for 6.5 years. But how you've overcome doubts, doubters, built teams, overcome challenges. But we start with a little bit of rapid fire just to get the juices flowing. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. You've talked about living your passion and designing your perfect day to help you imagine kind of what that looks like. What's the first thing that you think about when you imagine your perfect day?
I think just being around the people that I want to hang out with, right? That give me energy, that not only do I appreciate them and who they are, but also make me curious, that make me ask questions, make me, learn as well. So I'm a lifelong learner, and something I talk about in the book that I think more than anything, I think it's a piece that is missing out of many people's lives, is that they are not committed to learning. They think they have to go back to school in order to learn, or maybe switch jobs. But I think more than anything, there's so much access to ways you can learn along the way, and from different people as well. So that's podcasts and interviews too. So it's definitely it's something that I preach. But that is the perfect day.
People and learning, themes we will come back to later in the conversation. All right, you've had a few jobs before the 16-year run at Hintwater. You worked at a toy store, a Mexican restaurant. What was your favorite job before Hint?
I feel like I picked up a little bit from everything. Again, all these little learning experiences. But I think where I was probably most surprised was that first job when I was in a toy store. I had, was hired to be the Sunday afternoon cashier initially at age 14. My dad said, "How did you get a job at 14? Didn't they ask you for your ID?" And I'm like, "I don't have an ID. I'm 14. What would I give them?" So they just kind of went along with it. And but more than anything, I became a buyer. We didn't really officially call me that, but after a while, the owner of the small toy store said, "You seem to know what everybody wants for teenage kids, so maybe you can come and help me do the buying for the store." Again, I was a kid, so of course I knew what everybody wanted. And it was, that's where I learned about margins and concepts like less is actually more, and clutter is not where you want to be in any category, because you really want to make it simple for people to ultimately, transact and do a purchase. But I would say that was probably the place where I learned the most, just because I went in really not understanding at all what I was going to learn. But I think in every single one of my roles along the way, I felt like there was this, it was really hard until it wasn't hard concept. And I seek those things out. I'm not afraid to go and try the hard things. As you and I were talking before we went live, I'm constantly creating new categories. The hand sanitizers, that was my COVID project in the early COVID, because I couldn't find a great hand sanitizer. Before that, it was sunscreen. So I'm constantly challenging myself and making myself a little nervous in the beginning until it actually seems a little easier.
This may be a pop quiz question. How many flavors? I have like you sent a bunch. How many flavors of hint are there?
Well, there's a few different answers, only because we do small, we call it smaller, kind of small batch flavors. And yeah, but generally we're right around 25 flavors of hint.
And if I made you pick your favorite, this is not like picking your favorite child, like they don't have feelings, but if you had to pick your favorite hint water flavor, what is it?
You know, I just got back from Maine, and I think I shipped too much cherry hint. I've always, cherry is one of my favorites, but I was really, this morning when I woke up, I was missing clementine. So I'll have to go with clementine this morning. I love clementine hint. We used to have clementines growing up. I grew up in Arizona and had orchards in my backyard, and I had clementines, and I love clementines.
Okay, 3 words or less. What's the hardest thing about hiring?
I like people.
That's a good one. We can dig on that one. Okay, and maybe build on that. What's your favorite interview question and why? Like, what are you looking for in it?
Tell me when you failed and you felt incredibly challenged by this failure and how you surfaced.
And what are you looking for in the answer? Like, why do you ask that one?
I think it's most important to see how they go through the process, the setup. First of all, there is typically a story. When people say they've never failed, that's not typically something that you want on the team, because they are not necessarily open to learning from their processes. They've instead just decided, I'm going to forget about these challenging times or these failures. And I'm looking for people who want to own when things were hard and how they surfaced and figured out things about themselves. Were surprised by things. Maybe they were going right, and then they figured out that they should be going left, and they picked up and did something different. And so, you just learn. It's not so much about one thing. I think it's really, for me, it's about understanding, can the person look back and connect the dots? Can they learn from those times? And I mean, it's interesting how many people that I've met, including people on the team at Hint, who haven't wanted to interview people because they've been fired. And I'm actually very, very interested in talking to people who have been fired, because hopefully they won't want to do it again, right? They won't make the same mistake twice, whatever they made. And again, we're not talking about somebody who's been indicted, right? I'm talking about somebody that just, for whatever reason, was in the wrong role. Maybe like the company wasn't so forthcoming about their financial situation. As you know, from Silicon Valley, there's situations where, there's private equity involved that maybe you just didn't really understand any of that before going in. And I think more than anything, it's really trying to understand where their head is.
Totally. All right. I want to start at the beginning, rewind 16 years ago-ish, when you were starting Hint. And you talked about, like, the goal was not to necessarily create a new category, but to take an existing category and just do it better. Easier said than done. And you've talked a lot about imposter syndrome and undone. What gave you the confidence to say, like, yep, I'm going to go do this thing that I'm going to make water better?
So I think, having worked for some entrepreneurs, directly or indirectly, but entrepreneurial companies, everything from, well, I started my career after college at Time, so that was not really a startup by any means, but uh, I was recruited out of there to kind of a late stage startup. We didn't call it that at the time, called CNN, which, it was probably in 40% of households at that point. I was living in New York and I had to have cable, which is what CNN runs on. And so I knew what cable was, but beyond that, there were very few people who were, I guess, my age in my early 20s who had cable. I mean, it was definitely something where people sort of viewed it as kind of, if you have extra cash, you'll go and get cable. But I had no way to actually have television. I had no friends in New York. I moved there alone, not knowing anybody. So it was my job and, my little 200 square foot apartment that I was living in. So of course I had to have television. But again, I think looking back on what I learned starting at CNN, where, Ted was still running around the office in his suit and cowboy boots and, saying everybody needs 24-hour news. And there were plenty of people who were saying, I don't know. Like, I don't know that they do. I mean, it doesn't seem like that you're going to be able to get it in every single household. You got, the big three but I think listening to a founder and CEO like that were watching and listening to how so many people thought he was crazy, but you're like, he's so crazy, but yet he keeps getting into more and more households, and it kind of makes sense what he's talking about. And then moving on to when I came to Silicon Valley, I worked not directly for Apple, but for a spin out of Apple, which was doing this thing called CD-ROM shopping. Again, it was incubated inside of Apple. It was a Steve Jobs idea. There were many people who thought, well, why would you put graphics on a disk? But Steve Jobs felt that dial-up was limiting how graphics actually came across the internet. And I'm like, he's right. I mean, that's why graphics aren't on the internet. And so he said, just give people this disk and tell them to stick it in the machine and it'll go on to their computer. And they don't need to know all the, ins and outs of it. And so again, I think seeing, directly or indirectly, this purpose, this solve for a problem made me believe that these people were humans. And then of course, Steve Case as well after that, but they were humans who just had an idea and they put stakes in the ground and they had followers who supported them, who continued to move forward, the dream and the mission. But so many different things along in all of those three, journeys, I guess, that I had made me a lot more confident to think, well, I've got an idea that to solve a problem that I have. So why don't I just go do it? And I mean, the number of times that I saw and heard those individuals talk about, if we are wrong, then it just goes back to being what it was. And I think that that's something that all entrepreneurs need to remind themselves of, is that, and frankly, larger companies and maybe people who have no interest in becoming entrepreneurs need to remind themselves of too, is that you're, as an entrepreneur, and especially a visionary entrepreneur, or, so many of the things that those people have been called, you seem crazy when you're first out there. You're hanging with one foot off of a cliff and people are laughing at you. They're doubting you. But you look at the numbers and you see the traction that you're actually getting, and not everybody sees those same numbers, but it after a while you make those baby steps and you see that you're getting more and more consumers engaged on it. And then you're like, look at the progress that we've made along the way. And it's becoming more of a real idea.
So you talked a lot about the people who you followed who had like tremendous conviction building things new and seeing what the future could look like. You then became that person, and then you had to build a team around you, right, to help execute it. You can't do it yourself. What did the early team at Hint look like? Like the first couple of people who were involved on the journey with you, who were they? How did you get them involved? What made them crazy enough to also believe that, with you, they could change how, what the face of water looked like? Like, what was that first nucleus of the team?
Yeah, so I had been incubating this idea inside of my kitchen, my house, wrote a little mini business plan, and I decided that it was time to finally share this with my husband, Theo, because I was taking $50,000 out of my bank account, and I thought it, I definitely earned that money on my own, but I thought it probably was a pretty good idea to share with him what my idea was versus him thinking that I was going to the Bahamas with a bunch of girlfriends or something, and that's true story. And I was also pregnant with my fourth child, which I was trying to figure out, do I tell him the news about, the $50,000 or the fourth child, or, which comes first? And so
which came first?
It all, well, actually, the $50,000 came first, and then I didn't like his reaction. I had it all mapped out. I was going to tell him that, and then probably tell him about the fourth child, Justin, the next day. But instead, I had a name for the company. It was called Wawa. And he started laughing because I didn't grow up on the East Coast, right? I grew up in Arizona. I lived in New York, but there weren't a lot of Wawas in the area that I was living in New York too. And he grew up in New York. And when I said that it was, the name of the company was Wawa, and he just started laughing. And he's an intellectual property attorney, or was. He's a recovering one, as he talks about himself now. But he said, okay, I'm not going to argue with you about the money, but please don't call it Wawa, because if this thing is successful at all, he was like, they're going to crush you like a bug. I mean, you cannot call it Wawa. And I said, fine. And
for those who don't know, there's a huge convenience store chain called Wawa in southern New Jersey. It's massive.
And so we went on, and he said, so what is, just talk to me about some other names that you were thinking of. And I said, well, I really hadn't thought of other names, because I thought Wawa was terrific and really great. So then I started talking about, well, we're giving people hints, and there's a hint of flavor. And then all of a sudden I said hint, and he said, nope, 4-letter word. You'll never get it trademarked. And so he was not my favorite person at this moment at all. And so then I said, it'd be really nice if you'd be a little nicer to me, because I'm pregnant with our fourth child. He was like, you're starting a company in an industry that you know nothing about. And so let's see. So you're going to have a fourth child. When are you having your fourth child? Your fourth child? And I said, in about 7 months. And he said, okay, so you're going to have 4 kids under the age of 6, and you're starting a company. Like, do you think that's smart? I mean, and I think he did that face exactly that you're making right now. He was just like, he walked out of the room. I wasn't sure if he was coming back. And then he did come back, and he said, okay, I'm not going to argue with you about this. It's your money. You made this money. I do not think it's the best idea in the world that you've ever had. And I think your timing is lousy, but how can I help? How can I support you? And so I think he thought by supporting me that he would come alongside and figure out where the holes are and convince me to give up.
To not do it.
Yeah, to not do it. But I took the bait, and I said, okay, well, I'm going to a factory in Chicago in a couple of days. I've got childcare, and, it'd be great if you came with me. And so he did. And it was at that moment when he really saw kind of the bigger picture for it, which is exactly what I had in mind when I was starting Hint, which was I never looked at starting Hint because I wanted to start a beverage company. For me, it was about a purpose of redefining what water looked like, because I felt that the only reason why I had become hooked on Diet Coke for so many years, I was drinking diet soda. And the only reason why people go in that direction, they know that they're supposed to drink more water, but they don't because it's boring. That's it. And you know, anybody who starts drinking soda or diet soda, it's because water's boring, right? They've been told drink 8 glasses. They, you know,
Mm-hmm.
all of that, but they don't do it. And so I thought that if I could actually get people to enjoy water again and develop a choice that didn't have sweeteners in it, and again, not just sugar. 16 years ago, everybody was talking about sugar. Nobody was talking about these diet sweeteners. And I realized in my own experience that diet sweeteners were not making me as healthy as I wanted to be. I mean, the backstory was when I gave up diet soda, Diet Coke in particular, I lost over 60 pounds in a year just by giving up diet sweeteners. Now, I was not, when I would share that information with people, you know, a little over 16 years ago, people would say, come on, like you must have been drinking full-fledged soda, you know, sugar soda. And I'm like, no, I was drinking diet. And so when I looked around at the choices on the shelf, it was all about healthy perception versus healthy reality. Vitamin water was super hot. You know, it was out there. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, they didn't even have a diet version of that product. It was all, you know, sugary stuff. So I think for me, it he was really that he was that first guy that I pulled in. That again, he had a different agenda. He thought he was going to convince me to, you know, throw it away and stop doing it. But
The next
that's
employee, the next hire that you had to close must have been really easy compared to that.
so easy. I mean, it was just, yeah, but it, you know, I think it's, look, people have said to me over the years, what's it like working with your husband? And I think for us, we just had really different skill sets, you know,
Mm-hmm.
from day one, and really appreciated each other's. But you know, there was a little bit of probably eye rolling there, like I don't know why we're doing this kind of thing, you know, along the way. But pretty soon, you know, we both realized that it was a bigger purpose around if we could actually get people to enjoy water again, then we could change health in the world.
Yeah.
And it
So,
sounds crazy, but it's, you know, it's still what the mission is today.
so how did you? So, aside from your husband, who you brought on board, perhaps reluctantly at first, the next set of hires, where did you go find them? What were you looking for? What were the skill sets that you brought on next after that?
Yeah, you know, I think one of the big mistakes that I made early on was thinking that here I had kind of grown up in tech. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
initially publishing and media and then moved into tech. And I kept thinking, gosh, there's so many things that I don't know about, you know, this industry. And I need to hire people with, you know, years of experience that come from Coke or Pepsi or, you
Yeah.
know, have done it before, vitamin water or whatever. And what I found was that because we were not only developing a brand new company from day one, which some of those people had been at Vitamin Water early on, but it was this new category, and it wasn't just a category around beverage, but it was also a category around health. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you actually get people to to jump in and and not only buy your product as a consumer, but also, I mean, we had the same issue from buyers, grocery buyers. Again, this is even before direct to consumer was really happening, in particular in the beverage category and food category. But it was really hard because we couldn't get shelf space. So, you know, we were in Whole Foods and some sort of specialty markets on the coast, but we couldn't get in mainstream grocery because we didn't have that, you know, category
Right.
that, and we couldn't be in a planogram. And so these people that we were hiring early on, you know, they would walk in to the buyer and they'd say, hey, we've got this great product. And, and they'd run into the same problems that I ran into, which was, we don't have a category like that in the planogram, so we can't put you on the shelf. And they didn't know how to, weave around it. They didn't know how to go out and find the customer like we did. And so one of the things that we realized is like, we'll do the best we can, getting it into, getting it on shelves in stores where we can, but let's go find those customers. I mean, one of the most impactful conversations that I had shortly after we got on the shelf at Whole Foods, I had a customer reach out to me. We had put an email and a phone number on the back of the bottle, which was something you did in tech, but people weren't really doing it in beverage. And so I remember this gentleman reaches out to me and bought our product at Whole Foods in San Francisco. And he said, I really love your product a lot. I've been looking for an unsweetened flavored water. Like, why aren't you in more locations? And I shared the story about, we're not really a category according to all these grocery stores. We don't have competition. So we're not, a big enough category, even if
I love, by the way, like the CEO founder of the company having like an in-depth conversation with one customer who like drinks your water. Like you're at that stage, getting that deep in the discussion.
It was awesome. And, I think initially, we didn't have a customer service department. It was me. Right. I was answering. I mean,
was it your phone number? There's a phone number now. It's an 866 number.
No, we definitely, ponied up for our own number there from day one. But it was interesting because the thing that this gentleman shared with me that was really, really interesting for me, again, going into my curiosity, was this disease that he had called type 2 diabetes, which 16 and a half years ago, nobody, like, it was tiny. It was like 1% of the population. And he, shared that he ran marathons, he was eating healthy, but he found that these diet sweeteners were something that was, really playing with his body. He couldn't define it as, insulin resistance and things that, a lot of people have tracked today to diet sweeteners, but it was interesting because I felt like, gosh, here's this person that really gets what I'm doing and wants to enjoy water and wants to move away from the sweeteners, not just the diet sweeteners, but doesn't want the sugar. So I said, so tell me, like, have you met other people who have this disease, type 2 diabetes? It's like, yeah, I've actually, go to this doctor in San Francisco and I went to this fun run where I found these other people and I've met people along the way. And I said, oh, this is really interesting. So we started showing up at those events. I went and got an appointment with that doctor to try and understand a little bit more about, because I thought if I can just find these people, if I can find these customers, then they'll help me to grow the brand, which is a very different mindset than maybe somebody who's worked at, Coca-Cola for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. It's this curiosity. It's like find your customers and solve their problem. And so, we dropped, this doctor was at UCSF. We dropped samples and we said, this is what we're trying to do. What do you think? Do you think any of your patients would be interested in this? And he'd say, where is it for sale? And we said, that's the problem. It's not for sale in very many locations, but we'll sell it to you in your office if people are interested in this. And so just, again, kind of going at it, finding the customer. And when you're really ahead of where the rest of the world is, it's hard. It takes time. It's daunting. It's scary. But I think more than anything, we just thought, what's the worst that can happen? I go back to tech, be fine. I'll have a great story that we couldn't figure it out. The big bad soda companies, like were crushing us and we couldn't do it. But I thought, I don't know. I kind of think there's something here. Maybe I should just go for it.
So you shared at the beginning that in the 3 words or fewer, that the hardest thing about hiring is I like people. Why did you say that And how did that influence how you thought about hiring the team early on?
I think that you can like people, especially in an interview, right? You can definitely have that half an hour time with somebody. You can even invite them in for one more hour, but it's challenging to get down to the bottom, to get to their curiosity and get to them understanding, or get to you understanding how curious they are. Because I think especially when, there's different phases of a startup, but you need people who are incredibly curious. I mean, no matter what industry you're in, you have to have people, especially in those early days, that are against the odds, people that are trying to, that they believe in your drink. I mean, they're not walking in drinking a Red Bull. I mean, that's an easy, right? Like first pass, but you have to figure out what gets them there. Like, what do they do in their spare time? What are they really passionate about? And I think, for me over the years, that's another thing that people have been able to share with me during these interviews is, the story, the backstory. And what I think is always so fascinating is that we got our story out there, not on purpose, but because it was the way that we described the company, because we didn't have any money for advertising. I mean, we were still trying to find the audience. And so we just kept telling people like why I did it. I did it because I was getting off of diet soda and, and got the message out there. But it's amazing how people would find the drink, like the drink. Many people in Silicon Valley who were drinking it at many of the offices that were there, and then they would kind of create their own story around it. I mean, many people in Silicon Valley will say this was a tech executive who decided to go and take on a different industry. I'm like, okay, I guess I did that. I mean, I never really thought about it like that, right? But that's how I thought about it. So, yeah, so I think more than anything, it's finding, are these people curious enough? Are these people able to get up even when they, get pushed down? Because I think especially in the early days, that the number of times you feel like you're building the puzzle and getting momentum, and then suddenly like somebody grabs 100 puzzle pieces off your table. You're like, what are you doing? You can't do that. And you're like, all right, well, I still have a lot of the puzzle to build, so I'll just keep going. But it's hard and it's frustrating. And if you don't have that mindset, then I think that it's really difficult. There's way easier ways to make money too, but there's not many places where your curiosity can be super satisfied.
You are still, I think, personally involved in the hiring process for folks who join Hint. Is that true?
I am.
What role do you play? How do you make the time? Like, what does your role actually look like in the hiring process today? Now, how many people are at Hint now? Several hundred.
200, 200-ish. We have people all over the country. We have about 100 people in kind of street sales positions. So I don't get to meet those people as much. I mean, I try to talk to them on the phone or get on a Zoom. We try to do that, but I think that's probably the hardest thing when you're a founder is that, that a role needs to be filled, but you just don't have time to be as involved in the process. So I'm probably less involved in kind of director level and below. But definitely I try to at least make an appearance along the way, because I think that's the other thing when you're doing something. Particularly in Silicon Valley, we have a lot of people who never in a million years thought that they were going to work in tech. Work in beverage. They had come from tech, and then they just decided that they weren't passionate about tech, but they could use what they had learned in tech and apply it. to our industry. And I think just having a mission, having a passion, I think that there's no better time for those kind of companies to get started, where people are, they're realizing that it's not just about having a job. If you're going to spend lots of hours in a job, you better enjoy it. You better really feel like there's a purpose behind the company, that they're doing something that is, it's okay for it to be hard, but they're getting traction. And yeah.
You've talked about, in the context of hiring, categorizing potential employees, some superstars, kind of clock punchers, folks who fall in between. How do you think about defining what you're looking for in a given role? Are you always looking for a superstar? Is that the bar for every single role? How do you think about, cascading when you're not the hiring manager, you're not involved in every single hire? How do you cascade to your leadership team the certainty to know what they really should be looking for in a given role?
Yeah, I would say I'm actually more hesitant to hire superstars, because I think oftentimes when you're hiring superstars into roles, they have this baked in idea about what they should be doing. And they're very hard to adjust. Not always, but but I think especially if you want somebody to come in and share ideas, but also be willing to learn about new ideas and new ways of doing things. That's a really, really important aspect to be looking for. So, on the other hand, I I love people who can own their mistakes and their challenges along the way. I would say that there's a big chunk of our employees who have been at failed startups. And whether or not we actually have a few founders who have, who will say to this day that they never want to be a founder again. They never want to be a CEO again. But those are the people actually who really understand what goes on as a CEO, and that it's not just about one role, but that you have 10 hats that you're wearing at one time, and have a real appreciation and can wear a lot of different hats if you need them to. So I think, passion and curiosity, I don't really care if people have been in our industry or not. I think that the most important thing is showing that they're, really, really interested and passionate about health. I think the majority of the people that we have inside of Hint have their own story of whether it's addiction, or just in general, how health became, something that they couldn't fix in their own life, that it was like a runaway train. And then they figured out how to get it under control or totally make it better. There's a lot of those people in our company. And, I think the idea of, for many of, as I mentioned before, going up against the big soda companies, it is something that maybe you didn't think about it as something that you'd eventually do, but it feels pretty good, right? It feels pretty good that you're trying to change something that, to many looks closer to cigarettes, right? To, to that it just is not, kind of, I don't know, to many people, not on the right side of the fence, I guess.
It's clear that you hire for curiosity, passion, alignment with the vision. That feels like it's really, for any role that you're looking for, the absolute core of who you're looking to bring onto the team.
Totally.
What's the most effective set of investments you've made with your leadership team to ensure that commitment, that culture remains constant as the team has grown?
I think that more than anything, bringing in I look at our leadership team too, coming in from all different industries, all different size of companies, all different kinds of roles within those companies too, some C-suite, some not. That I think more than anything, just bringing those ideas together. We meet weekly and discuss kind of different ways to think about things. But I think there's this consistent thread uh, amongst the entire leadership team that that we can't stay complacent. We have to keep moving forward. And how do we keep moving forward? I think that we are more than likely to, I guess, when I look at sort of the teams, I think it just is more and more emphasized, I think, especially through COVID, while everybody's, been sheltering in place, is that the small team stuff happens naturally. It's where the big teams, getting people together,
Mm,
in sort of bigger formats, I think is definitely something that I think, we're still trying to tackle and figure out exactly how that, we bring it together. But I think that more than anything, 200 people in a company is very different than 2,000 people in a company too.
sure.
We're still pretty small.
Yep.
So that I think is nice. I wish we wouldn't get much bigger than that, because I think more than anything, it's nice to have kind of that smaller, much more cohesive
Yeah.
team.
You wrote in your book about your dad, who you felt like was a frustrated entrepreneur in the context of a larger company. How do you think about, in the context of Hint, creating the space for people who have that entrepreneurial spirit? I mean, you clearly hire for that, right? The curiosity and the passion and the drive. How do you create the space within the context of an organization to give allow people to realize that entrepreneurial spirit, to like not have the same frustration that your dad felt?
Yeah, so I think first of all, we lead inside the organization with a theory of everybody has their role, but if you want to learn about other people's roles, that's definitely something that you should go do. So one of the things that we instituted a couple of years ago was asking everybody to reach out once a month to people within the organization that they had no idea what their job was. Just go like this and reach out to them and get a conference call with them and talk to them about their job. And because what I found is oftentimes, if you've been working, for example, in a sales organization,
Mm-hmm.
that you have no idea really what a life cycle marketing person does. Like, what is that exactly? And
Mm-hmm.
so you have an opportunity to be able to go and learn about these different roles. And it's not weird at all to, when you normalize it and you encourage people to do that, then
Mm-hmm.
people kind of expect people to reach out to them and take that hour to, at any level in the organization, to talk to them about what their role is. But I think that it's also, creates an environment too, where coming into a startup, especially when you've been working inside of, maybe you're working in finance inside of a, bank organization or financial organization, you don't get an opportunity to sort of cross pollinate in many areas. And, one of the stories I share in the book is about an individual who still works at Hint. He's worked at Hint for a long time. He had been in finance, and it was kind of the first place that he saw supply chain and the dependence on supply chain
Mm-hmm.
of finance. And so he had interacted with supply chain, but he never really knew what supply chain was until he came inside of an organization like Hint. And now he runs our supply chain. And so years later, and so again, looking at where are the opportunities. I think that's what small entrepreneurial companies allow people with experience sort of in their specialty to go in kind of cross over into those other areas.
Yeah, it's relevant to a question that got submitted ahead of time by Cassidy, who's at age 16. Around, obviously you've made actually a point to say, hey, I made mistakes hiring people who had like for like experience, industry experience. And so you've made a real focus on hiring for non-traditional backgrounds and career switchers and the like. Are there specific processes, systems, resources, ways that you've organized Hint to ensure that those folks can be successful? Like, have you learned from experience? Like, have you made non-traditional hires that actually didn't work out and you learned from that experience and said, oh, we need to do something different in order for that person to be able to thrive?
I don't know if it was specific to a person, but what I figured out, I remember early on, again, coming into this industry, not knowing much about it, that we thought we should go hire a buyer, somebody who's been a buyer at a store, and that will, that'll be the perfect person to help us sell because they've talked to all these salespersons. Seem really logical.
Yep.
There is a different mindset in somebody who, it's not to say that it can't happen, but I think that it is unlikely that somebody who has been buying all the time, it is not a natural thing to be able to sell. And I never really thought about that until we made that mistake not only one time, and then we let some time go by, and then we thought, oh, let's try it again. And the same thing happened. And it was, we owned it. We separated from both of those people. It was, fine. We all knew that it was like a mismatch, but yeah. But I think it was, again, look, you make mistakes along the way, you learn and you move forward, figure out how to move forward.
You shared in a very short segment with Wall Street Journal, like the elevator segment, that one of the most challenging things about being a woman entrepreneur is actually getting support from other women entrepreneurs. Why did you say that? What's so hard about it? What's the challenge?
Well, I think sometimes, and I think it's, it really varies, but I think in particular, so often, and I don't even think it's just women. I think it's just other entrepreneurs in general, that I think it just depends on where you are in sort of the company stage. Because if you're in a late stage startup and you're whatever, like over 100 million, and then you see the people that are sitting at the first million or sitting at the first 10 million, it just takes time. And there's a lot of questions along the way. And I think time for any entrepreneur is something that is limited. Right. And I think that that's a struggle that every entrepreneur at every stage is really trying to kind of manage. Right. And frankly, any business person probably as well, that it's just, they just don't have a lot of time. So I think it's less about, any gender. I think it's more about just kind of getting the help that you need and the support you need. And then I think also what I've realized along the way too, is that while you might think that somebody, might not be supporting you, maybe they don't have time to do it, people may not actually have all the answers, right? I used to think that, oh, people have been through this, and so they'll know how to raise money. They'll know how to do this stuff. And more than anything, what people are going to share with you is what their own journey has been, and it will be colored by their journey too. And they won't necessarily actually share every piece of their journey along the way and the challenges that they had been through. And I think that is a piece that I've learned along the way as well. So more than anything, you have to be willing to put the work in. You have to be willing to get up tomorrow, even though, your plans were shattered yesterday. You have to be willing to kind of get back up and keep trying to build, and don't be daunted by the crumbling mountain that is happening. Instead, just figure out how to get over the sand. I mean, whatever it takes in order to make it happen. And there's definitely, I feel like you can hear it in somebody's voice when I hear this out of entrepreneurs. And like you said, it's not just about anyone can come up with an idea. It's about this ability to kind of keep knocking down the walls, keep getting over the mountain, keep figuring out like, what can we do now? And also to be willing to connect those dots, particularly when you've had challenging times, to try and not make that mistake twice. Or if you're going to make that mistake twice, say no more after 2 times, because then that's a habit.
That's your answer to the interview question of like the big failure and the self-awareness. It's like, I made the same mistake twice. That was on never again. Never make the same mistake twice. That's a good one. As you think about the next chapter for Hints, what time horizon do you think about for the next chapter? You've been at it for 16 years, right? Like, as you think about like the next hires who join the company, what time horizon are you thinking about as you bring new folks on? A quarter, a year, 5 years, 10 years? Like, how do you think about the length of the chapter?
It's a good question. Well, I think something that is pretty unusual about our company, especially in the beverage industry, is that everyone has equity. So it may sound to any tech executives listening or investors, it may sound strange, but a lot of beverage companies and food companies don't actually give people equity in the company. And so I think for us, it coming from tech, it was just something that we just thought really made sense to have people have skin in the game along the way and grow. So I think no matter, our goal is really to help people, help consumers get healthy. And we are willing to put stakes in the ground and be there and continue to do it as long as it takes. Having said that, I think that we've had an incredible year. We've had triple growth on our direct to consumer business. Our overall business has grown 50%, which is way above what the industry has seen for sure. And then health and wellness. People finally are understanding what I was talking about 16 years ago. And so it's, I think for any entrepreneur who's out there, I mean, to build a solid company that can stand on its own, that could go public, that could go and do something that, to have options more than anything else, it takes time to do that. Totally. And so I think there are a lot of options for us, but I'm also willing to continue doing what I'm doing. Because I truly believe that we're helping people. And I think when you're building a company that you feel like is helping somebody, helping a lot more people than it was yesterday, that's a powerful thing. It's an incredibly powerful thing. I mean, you feel like, 16 years ago, no one understood what I was talking about. And today they do. And so I think it's and when people come to us, and I still get emails, I'm not on the customer service calls. I'd love to be, but I can't be on the customer service calls, but I still read emails from customers. And when people are writing and sharing how Hint has changed their life, oftentimes they were sitting in, tech offices and they decided to try our drink, and then they controlled their type 2 diabetes. They got rid of sweeteners in their life. They figured out what the formula was that their body needed in order to get healthy. I mean, that's a powerful thing with a $2 or less bottle of water. I mean, that changes somebody's life. Like, it's kind of crazy. Right. So if I can sit there and do that, I'll do this all day long. I'll do this for the next 100 years.
All right. Last question. We're almost up on time, but I would have to imagine that you think about every single candidate who comes in through your interview process as a prospective customer, right? Everybody can drink Hint water.
Totally.
how have you thought about designing, or what's most important about your interview and your hiring process when you think about candidates as consumers, like delivering a great experience to them? Right, they're not all going to get hired, right? But they can all drink Hint water. How do you think about delivering, or what have you done specifically to deliver like a great candidate experience to folks along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think more than anything, we don't want to waste people's time, right? Because I'm a huge believer, as I mentioned before, that time is really valuable, whether or not that individual values it or not. And I think, obviously being kind, letting people kind of know what they're going to be getting into. I think, oftentimes when you're coming from a situation where you're in a lot larger company, you've got assistants everywhere, whatever, you've got an office, or, that's just not what our environment is. And we're not going to be the place for every single person. I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of unknown too that goes on. It's sort of, there's often the people that we're hiring for are new. It's a total unknown. It could fail. It's sort of mini startups within a startup. You asked me about, my father and sort of, how we're creating these, and either you like to do that or you want to support. And so I think that more than anything, we try to really lay out exactly what a typical job is, that typical role will be, and sort of what might be the, challenges, what will success be along the way as well. And I think that, that's the best we can do. But I think more than anything, we try not to string people along if we don't think it's the right candidate, because I just don't think that that's right. Hopefully we've been good at that. I think that it's definitely it's something that means a lot to me.
Well, Kara, thank you for spending the time. It's an inspiring story. It's an awesome product. I was saying before, this is the only hand sanitizer that my boys will let me spray on their hands. So thank you for the care package. It was incredibly valuable. No, this has been fantastic. You've built like a really mission and kind of vision-driven organization. I think that translates to the product, and also obviously the team that you've built. Really appreciate you sharing the time with us. And we gotta we don't have a pantry to stock, but if we did, this would be in it.
There you go. Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate the time, and really great to meet you guys as well.
Thanks. Take care, Kara.
Thanks.
Bye.